Hello and welcome back. If you're new to us today, this channel is dedicated to using SWOT analysis techniques to examine whether a company is worth investing in as a retail investor. Today we're going to look at Barrick Gold, which is a gold and copper mining company spread out across the world. We'll be looking at its strengths, its weaknesses, and the opportunities and threats that could affect your holdings. SWOT analysis gives us an opportunity to look at the fundamentals of any company without having to dig deep through all its financial charts. Now, as commodities, gold and copper are extremely important for most of the tech stocks that we explore on this channel. And as such, taking one of the larger companies and breaking it down should give us some insights into what kind of future we're going to have generally across all markets. More on that shortly, but first a word from our sponsors. Now, the strengths are quite simple. This is a well-established company. It's been around since 1983. It's got over 8,500 employees with multiple mines all over the world. It has links to obviously large numbers of investment companies and resources under its belt that exceed tens of billions of dollars. With gold mines and investments all over the world, obviously you can have different size mines and they're all going to come and do different things. Nevada Gold Mines, I believe, is one of the largest mines. I think it's the largest in the world. It is a partnership between Barrick and Newmont Corporation. It's a combined operation. It is the single largest gold mine complex in the world. Employs 7,000 people. This is according to their website. It has 10 underground and 12 open cast mines, and it's responsible for about 35 million in operating costs. Barrick Gold controls 61% of this joint venture, operates the business, while Newmont owns 38 and a bit %. Now, Tanzania is one of their acquisitions. It was taken from a company called African Barrick Gold. It produces, it has a valuation of just over $3.5 billion. So, as with most of these mines here, they all do really well. The operating budgets are planned around a 1,000 dollar an ounce for gold. I believe that's what it says. That's what I'm reading when I'm going through their portfolios. Now, I'm not going to go through every single mine as for the strengths, but one of the things that I have discovered during my research is that the Pakistani government are planning to give Barrick a mining lease. This was announced back in March 22. And it is believed that it should be able to produce about 250,000 ounces of gold, potentially around 200,000 tons of copper every year for the next 50 years. So, as strengths go, what can we say about Barrick Gold? It's very big. It has a lot of resources under its belt. It has a lot of value still in the ground that it can dig up. Dividends are done twice a year. Obviously, if you're going to invest and you just want a nice little tick over, this is probably going to be the best way of doing it, by putting a little bit of your investment, your portfolio, into Barrick Gold. So let's move on to the weakness of the company. Now, this isn't so much to do with the company itself as to do with its share price. And this is something that stung me in the past, and then believe me, it will sting you. Because of the way commodities are traded, even if the price is going up to the roof for gold and for silver and copper and all those metals, doesn't necessarily mean that the share price for this company will go flying up all the time. Investors look at different companies in different ways, and despite the fact that there are so many assets under the umbrella of Barrick Gold, overall confidence tends to pull the share price down quite a bit. It tends to fluctuate between $15 and $22 per share. As you can see from here, it is quite volatile at times. It tends to go up as we get close to dividends period, and then drop quite heavily. Now it's gone through 11 quarters of better than expected profits. This basically should mean that there are a lot of people investing in this company, but it isn't fashionable, it isn't a sexy company, it isn't a Google or an Apple or a Tesla. Kids aren't investing in this thinking that this is going to go to the moon. Nobody talks about Barrick Gold going to the moon. Believe me, I've looked. Now, the reason I believe that Barrick isn't a very sexy company and why its share price is so volatile, it comes down to the fact that, as with all kind of industrial companies of this scale, as you can imagine, there's a lot of partnerships going on in there, so control isn't 100%. This is a weakness. I mean, it's if you were sharing a house with somebody else and they were coming in redecorating or leaving a mess everywhere, obviously it's going to affect you as much as it is them. This has a knock-on effect with the share price, which is why it always goes up and down. I'm not going to advise you where you buy in on this as a price consideration. Just be aware that when you do come into this, you really want to push close to the bottom as possible, and you want to do this at a time of year when they're not going to be releasing press news to the press, because you never know when that's going to come up and drag the price down. So what are the opportunities? Well, they're fairly obvious. With COVID catastrophe, let's call it, which has thrown the entire planet into recession, there are a lot of operations out there that are going to start becoming cash hungry, and Barrick is a very well-weathered company when it comes to dealing with recessions and economic troubles, by the looks of it, looking at the surface value of the company. And I think they're always going to be able to kind of take over smaller mines, go into partnerships. There's always going to be some value to be had in, obviously in gold, but of course in copper, as these are major industrial components. With the price of gold being as high as it is, at the moment it seems to be fluctuating somewhere between $1,700 to $2,000, potentially $2,100 for an ounce of gold. Barrick Gold clearly has a lot still in the ground. It's obviously able to get out there, do deals with various governments around the world to be given permission to take over these mines. Having so much cash at disposal, and basically being able to kind of having so much cash at disposal will allow them to weather the storm and potentially expand, or at least very sustainably keep going, which I think if you're investing in it, you want to be investing in a company that where the share price isn't going to split or drop suddenly or disappear from the stock market that you're trading on. If you're doing trade tech stocks as a retail investor, you'll have come across this repeatedly, where a company you know fundamentally is capable of doing really well 5 years, 10 years after you bought the stocks, and then only to discover a month later that basically it's going to get kicked out of the NASDAQ or the New York Stock Exchange or London Stock Exchange or wherever you bought it from. I think this is a good stable company, and the price, although it does fluctuate a lot, it isn't going to drop out anytime soon. I don't think the company's going to go bankrupt anytime soon. I don't think it's going to just disappear off the market. I think it's a good hold all. I think it's basically like a 21st century version of Coca-Cola in the early days, without the stock splits. That's just my opinion. So the big threat at the moment is inflation. This is going up and up and up. It is in double figures for most countries on the planet at the moment, and gold is one of the last things I think people are able to invest in. The price of gold is extremely high, and for some reason nobody's putting their money into it. That sounds contradictory. It really does sound contradictory. But that's just the way it is. The price isn't going up as much as you'd expect this year as the increase in inflation took place. What we saw is peak gold taking place back in 2020, I think it was, where it jumped up to 2,000. And at the moment it's just floating around 1,700 to 2,000. But once inflation was declared, it didn't just suddenly go through the roof. It's this that is the biggest threat to the company. It's going to affect their costs going forward. It's going to affect their profits going forward. Because the water economy really is in a terrible state at the moment, and we'll come through it. We always do. There's always some way through it. But I think with everything the way it is, the threats to any corporation are its public image as much as anything. And this is one of the things with any industrial company, any mining company, is that it's not just kind of the way they're seen to be helping people. If it's employing lots of people and people are happy, then obviously you're not going to have any problems there. If your share price is stable and people even pay dividends, you're not going to have any problems there. What this company faces is environmental damage. And because it doesn't have full control over every single site, and the standards of operations can, although I think the aim of the company is how it should be, is to have the highest environmental standards where it is. Obviously you're going to have problems cropping up every now and then, because all companies will have this. Going forward, I think the environmental movement is going to become increasingly important. Not that it hasn't always been, but if you look at 2022, if you look at the mass droughts around the northern hemisphere, on top of the economic damage that we've suffered from COVID, I think it's incredibly important for any company, especially a company like this, to maintain the highest standards. That basically means there's no leaching the chemicals from various sites when they're dissolving the gold from the soil or from the rock as they process it. It means that there's no open holes in the ground just left to ruinous for local indigenous people to be able to enjoy the countryside or enjoy their own environment. It basically means that local communities aren't poisoned by what's going on. They're not disturbed too much by even the noise, which if you live in England is always the thing that shuts down mining operations. Regardless of how important it is to the company, and I hope a company like Barrick it is important, there's always going to be that little thing that's going to come out which could potentially shut down a mine for months at a time. The quality of the water, the quality of the air has to be pristine wherever it is or however it's operating. And of course, having said that, we have the new 21st century threat to gold, which is cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin was designed as a digital replacement for gold, which was always the go-to in times of trouble, and I think that's probably what's keeping the value of gold where it is. Although the value of cryptocurrencies, the value has dropped considerably. This is what's known as the crypto winter. You'll see this in other videos that I do, but I just want you to bear that in mind as a potential threat to a company like this. So in conclusion, is Barrick Gold Corporation a worthy investment as a retail investor? Now, if you're on this channel, you know that we do mainly tech stocks. We just look at stuff that can have essentially a good rate of value growth. We don't normally look at smaller companies, smaller shares of companies which have little value movement but give dividends, which is basically what Barrick Gold is from our perspective. Now, I tried to lay out the kind of environment that the company's in. I've not gone into too much detail about its overall operations or its financial position, although I do believe that's quite healthy and relatively stable if you think about it. If you want to look at more details of it, go to their website, look at what they've got, and also look elsewhere. Don't always just trust what any company's saying about itself. Make sure you keep a kind of wide berth of what that environment is. But as somebody who invests in tech stocks, you need to know what the commodities are going to be doing, and you need to keep an eye on companies that are producing these commodities, and Barrick Gold is one of those. So do I believe that you should invest in it? I think it's probably worthy of a small amount of your money, small amount of your investment, but just be wise to the fact that there are potential rivals in cryptocurrency and potential falls in its operations. So if you like this video, please subscribe. Please feel free to leave comments down below. Tell me what you think about Barrick Gold, and tell me what type of stocks you want me to review next. Thank you, and see you next time.